brilliant. So delighted to be here. Thanks a million for the opportunity. I like to start with this picture here. So that's myself and 8 of my closest friends. We played together since we were maybe 5 or 6. So that's me in the back left there, a lot younger and with a lot more hair. But that was maybe 10 or 12 years ago at a little tournament that we were playing in. And I'll come back to the reason why I have that photo in. But as Declan would have mentioned, my background is in Gaelic games and I would have worked for the GAA for a long time. And part of my role was going into schools and coaching and trying to get kids interested in Gaelic games and trying to get them to take part, not just in school, but also outside school. But I couldn't get my head around why so many kids at 9, 10, 11, 12 had no interest in taking part, not just in my activities, but in any activity. So to cut a long story short, I was very lucky to get involved with a great team in DCU, and you'll hear from one of my colleagues shortly after, it's Sarah Jane. But we started the Moving Well, Being Well project, and it was sort of a big focus on this was on physical literacy. So when we talk about physical literacy, it's complicated, right? But I'm going to try and explain it very, very simply here and give us a sort of a breakdown of what we tried to go at. And I'm going to focus in on one area in particular. So physical literacy, the physical competence, confidence, motivation to be active for life. As I said, it's complicated, but just think about it like this. If we have the physical competence, so that's the basic underlying skills. That means we'll be confident to take part in activities that have those skills. And that means we'll be motivated to take part in activities with those skills, which means we do it more often, which means we get better, and you have this cycle. So imagine Declan is good at kicking a ball, okay? That means he's confident to do it with his friends, with his family, okay? Which means he's motivated to take part in a game of football, potentially with their friends or family or whatever it may be, which means he gets better, and this positive spiral starts. And that can start from an early age, okay? We know that these different tools to be active for life. So we talk about having fun and enjoyment as our first thing when kids come into us. We provide a safe environment. We allow them to express themselves and develop that confidence and motivation. And then we give them the basic movement skills to be active, okay? So we talk about this positive spiral that we can start early in life, but we can also have this negative spiral of disengagement, and that can begin at an early age. So what that is that they don't have the basic underlying skills. So imagine we're all in school and the ball is thrown in for a game of football, and Declan is brilliant. He's flying around the place. He knows how to play. He's used to the hustle and bustle. He passes to me, who's not from a sporty background. I don't have those basic skills. Ball bounces off my foot, the other team score a goal, you know the rest. But what happens is everyone notices I'm not as good as Declan. And then I notice myself that I'm not as good as Declan. So think about that happening all the time. And that's where you can get this negative spiral of disengagement really from an early age. But the good news is we can create a positive spiral of engagement, okay, by focusing on this physical literacy. And I'm specifically going to talk about the fundamental movements aspect of that. So you probably all heard these before, like physical literacy. Sometimes the terms are used interchangeably. But we're basically talking about the foundational movements needed to progress to more complex skills, okay? So we're talking about really simple things: running, jumping, hopping, skipping, throwing, catching, really, really simple skills. And they're divided up into various different categories. So we've locomotor, which is moving your body, object control, which is the kicking, the catching, the throwing, etc. And then we've got stability or balance skills, okay? So all are really important, and I'm going to talk you through why. So I want you to think, like, how are we taught how to read? We weren't just given a book and asked to read it. We were taught the alphabet, the sounds of the letters, how to put them into words, sentences, etc. And from that, then we were eventually able to form sentences and then be able to read that book eventually. So it's the same with movement. We don't want to ask particularly young kids to take part in activities in which they don't have the basic underlying skills to do so. So what we did as part of Moving Well, Being Well, we tried to measure as much physical literacy components or anything that may add to it as we possibly could. So again, focusing on those fundamental movement skills, we looked at the mastery or near mastery of these skills. So here's all the skills we assessed on the left-hand side of your screen. Okay, so you can see run all the way down to overhand throw. And when I say mastery or near mastery, what I'm talking about is that they can do it perfectly every single time, or they can do it 9 out of 10 times. Like, they're nearly there. All right. And again, really, I can't emphasize enough how simple these skills are. Small little component based tests to see if they can perform the skill adequately. Now you can see here up the top, run, 75% have mastered the skill. All right, this is over 2,000 kids ranging in age from 5 to 12. And you might be thinking, oh, 75%, that's not too bad. But then think about it, that's 1 in 4 kids that can't run properly. All right, and then start thinking about how many activities could that potentially preclude them from. Okay, so when you start thinking about like that and you look at all the other skills, then you start thinking, okay, well, maybe this isn't great, and maybe this is we have to address this problem. So what we did next then is we looked at all these skills across the age group. So across the bottom of your graph here, right, you have the ages. So age 5 up to age 12. So basically corresponds to each year in school. And we looked at the progression from age all the way up. So what you have here, these green arrows are signifying a significant jump. So the 6-year-olds were significantly better than the 5-year-olds, the 7 significant than the 6, and so on, all the way up to the age of 10. But then we have this sort of plateau. So there's a slight increase from 10 to 11, but nothing to write home about, nothing to really hone in on. And there's actually a tiny decrease from 11 to 12. So what's happening here at age 10? That these skills are not progressing as they should, because all the research out there, you can see that line, that red line that's just come in there, that's the top score achievable. So it's not like we got to the top and we're staying there. We're still a good bit away from it. All the research would tell us that we should be able to master these skills by the age of 8, give or take a year or two, and depending on the complexity of the skill. But we should be able to master all these basics by the age of 8. But what's happening here at age 10, 11, 12, and how is that affecting these kids going into their adolescence? So we hear all the time about kids, adolescents dropping out of sport. We hear kids 13, 14, 15, major areas where they drop off sport. But what if this is happening earlier? What if something's happening earlier, and when they go into 13, 14, 15, it's now just a catalyst of maybe a new school, a new team, or maybe a competitiveness. That's the catalyst for them to jump away. So this is something that we're really trying to explore and look at further. We talk about these fundamental movement skills, and tried to look at them across gender and age as well. So boys in the blue, girls in the yellow, and only at age 11 and 12 do the boys have they're significantly better than the girls at ages 11 and 12. Okay, so you might, again, same as me, when I first looked at these results, I was like, oh, not too bad. I thought there'd be differences throughout. But when we break this down, remember what I said earlier about locomotor, object control, and stability skills when we break them down. So when we look at these, their locomotor skills, we can see the girls are significantly better than the boys, all the ages from 5 up to 10, barring 6. Okay. We can see when we look at stability, when we look at object control skills, then we can see that the boys are better than the girls at every age group, significantly better by a wide margin. So why is this important? Well, we know that looking at we know when we look at these fundamental movement skills that kids who master these skills at a young age are more likely to go on to be active in their teenage years. So think of the information that this is giving us here now. We're talking about, we know the boys are ahead of the girls in the object control skills. We know the girls are ahead of the boys in the locomotor skills. And that's in an Irish context. So now we know, well, there's certainly a focus we need to put on now. There's something we need to improve on to help them be as active as they possibly can be in whatever activity they wish in the teenage years. And the research would show us that those with the better proficiency at a young age are more active as teenagers. So how do we do this? Well, we go back and we think about our physical literacy model. So the physical competence, that's the basic underlying skills, and they lead into the more sport specific skills. And then we have to do it in a way that improves confidence and fosters confidence and motivation, so that we can continue to get better and they continually want to take part in activities, whether it be sport, competitive sport, individual sport, whatever they prefer to be involved in. Okay, and we see so many different we have these pathways, long-term athletic development pathways, where it shows an active start, fundamentals, physical literacy, and they're lovely and they're neat. Okay, and they look the part, and don't get me wrong, they're really, really important, and we do need to be looking at these. but it gives you the impression that this is perfect. Once we do this, the next part will fall in. So this one here I like, it's fundamental movement skills. Then you've got your fundamental sports skills, etc., 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 as it goes up. Okay, but in reality, and we all know this as coaches ourselves, it's not like that. It's much more complicated. This is a more accurate representation. If you're dealing with a group of kids, you've got different groups are at different kids at different levels. Some kids are very confident, some are not. So we need to think as coaches, well, how do we actually help all of those kids to get those basic movement skills, to be develop them in a way that's such that they're confident and they're motivated to try it, which starts that positive spiral of engagement that I mentioned earlier on. So there's a few ways. When you look at the coaching literature, and there's people on this call who be much better up on this sort of stuff than me, but I really like this one, the scaffolding approach. So we think small steps each time, little by little by little, and we give kids a safety net. Whereas if they don't go too hot, if they try to reach too far, they have a safety net to come back on. So it's step by step by step. We thought Nintendo. I love this. I use this slide a lot because Nintendo had it sussed from years ago. Back in the 80s or early 90s, most people had some sort of a game like this, and it was a case of, yes, just that one more level, one more level, one more level. And they're very smart in how they do it, because you go after it, you kill the boss at the end of Super Mario Brothers, and then you get to the next level. Straight away, you run out, you get killed yourself in the computer game, but you just go back to where you started from. So they're forever scaffolding you all the way along. You get more confident, and then you're motivated to get to the next step, the next level. Okay. We talk about, again, I love that picture, the importance of small steps, and it sort of ties in with what I would feel is really strongly rooted in my own coaching philosophy in terms of social development theory. So this really, really old research, but it stands true to the day. What a child can do with assistance today, she will be able to do by herself tomorrow. And that talks about the social interaction, cognitive development, the more knowledgeable other, which is you as the coach, and that zone of proximal development. Okay, so this one here it's really clear. That white circle down at the bottom, or oval, we can't do that, or that's too easy. They can do that perfectly. But likewise, the black one on the top right is too hard. It's too big of a leap, too much scaffolding to climb up, or too many levels to jump in Nintendo. The flow is where they're able to do things on their own, in the zone. You hear people talk about that all the time. But this is the sweet spot, this zone of proximal development, that you're able to help as a coach, help them develop with a little bit of help by using their scaffolding techniques or your Super Nintendo techniques or whatever it is. But by you knowing your kids and knowing the kids that you're involved coaching, you should be best placed to be able to help kids individually in that manner. So what I say here is, we think of that the small steps matter. You, the coaches, are that ladder. Okay, so what I'd say is, you build that foundation that sets children up to be active and to participate in sport. And look, it might turn out that it's not your sport, but that's okay, because sorry, I got ahead of myself there. We know if we provide a safe and a fun and a challenging environment that's set to each kid individually, but as part of a group, we know then that we're setting them up to be active for life. And I think people get caught up on this performance versus participation side, whereas I don't think it has to be one or the other. Because we know if kids are happy, if they're motivated, if they're confident, they're more likely to perform at a higher level. A colleague of ours in DCU, Anya McNamara, talks about the rocky road to the top all the time. And I'll skim over this, but it's a really interesting paper in terms of winning is okay. Kids like to be competitive. They like to win. So that's okay. But it doesn't have to be a dirty word when we're talking about participation. The two of them can go hand in hand, but we just have to realize what our priorities are at different areas as we're going through that coaching life cycle. We know active kids do better in life. So this, for me, when we're dealing with young kids in particular, this has to be our overriding end goal, to keep kids active as long as possible. And we know that all the health benefits that come with it will feature right throughout their life. And we know if they're active kids, tend to be active teenagers, and that then hopefully goes through into adulthood and beyond. Lastly, I just want to finish. So my own club in GAA, so we had a social value report done on the club, and trying to quantify in a monetary value what they offer to a community in a year. And it tended out, this is a volunteer club. Now, it's a big club, 3,500 members, but it ended up with 50 million in social value created in the local community in that year. And why is this important? Because when they broke it down, these independent people, they broke down the value on that, and it was improved health was nearly 30 million. Friendships then after that was nearly 20, and then sense of belonging. Okay, so it's just really useful, and I think affirming for us, it certainly was in the club, to see that we're having such an impact on kids' lives in terms of their health and the friendships that they create. And that sort of brings me back to this picture. These are 8 of my closest friends, and for me, the people who invested all the time in coaching us when we were kids, and some of them were our parents and others were just volunteers. But from within that group, we have 4 had played senior at both hurling and football in the club. 7 have played senior at one code or the other. 1 has won a championship, a club championship at the elite level. 4 have represented Dublin at some level. 1 has won medals with Dublin. 2 are involved with coaching at a really high level. 1 is the senior manager in the club at the moment. 1 is an adult games chairman in the club, back volunteering. 1 was a club vice chairman. That was myself for my sins. 6 have coached at underage in the club and continue to do so. And 7 are still playing at some level, or at least trying to. And again, I count myself there, trying to play as best we possibly can. But for me, that's a huge barometer of success for the coach, that the coaches that invested their time with us early on. So look, I talked an awful lot about the why and the how. I suppose was the what you could use. There's a lot of resources there that anyone could use in terms of moving well, being well. Some good resources there, and the iCoach Kid resources, of course, as well, are fantastic.